I woke up drifting in the middle of a freezing lake, my daughter unconscious beside me, and my son's boat disappearing into the distance. No phone, no engine, no help, just a handwritten note that said sorry, and the terrifying realization that the child I raised had decided my life was worth more dead than alive. In that moment, I understood that betrayal does not always come from strangers. Sometimes, it comes from the person who's once held your hand and promised to protect you forever. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We love seeing how our stories bring people together from every corner of the world. Your thoughts and comments are what make this community so special, and we're truly grateful to have you here. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story filled with drama, resilience, and unexpected twists. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and maybe grab your favorite drink because this is a tale you won't want to miss. Let's get started. My name is Margaret Turner, and I am 55 years old. I live in a small wooden house near the edge of Lake Michigan in Traverse City, where the mornings smell like pine trees and cold water, and the nights are so quiet that you can hear your own thoughts. When I look back now, it feels strange to think that this peaceful place once became the starting point of the worst nightmare of my life. But at the time, I believed I was safe. I believed I was blessed. I believed my family would never hurt me. 6 years ago, my husband died at a construction site. A faulty scaffold collapsed, and he never made it home. One moment he was texting me about dinner. The next, a police officer was standing at my door holding his helmet in his hands. After that day, my life split into two parts, before and after. Before, I was a wife, a partner, someone who shared her fears and hopes with another person. After, I became a widow, a single mother, and the only emotional support for my daughter, Lily. Lily was 7 when her father passed away. She stopped sleeping through the night for months. She used to crawl into my bed and hold my arm as if I might disappear too. I learned quickly that grief did not give me permission to fall apart. I had to be strong even when I did not feel strong at all. I packed lunches, helped with homework, attended school meetings, and pretended that everything was fine because that was what mothers were supposed to do. Before my husband died, I worked as a full-time high school teacher. I loved literature and history, and I loved watching teenagers slowly discover who they were. After his death, I switched to private tutoring so I could spend more time with Lily. The money was not great, but it was enough. We lived simply. We bought clothes on sale, fixed things instead of replacing them, and celebrated birthdays at home. I never complained. Having my daughter safe beside me was more than enough. Then, 1 year ago, my aunt passed away. She had lived quietly on the northern coast and owned several small lakeside resorts. I had always assumed she would leave everything to charity. Instead, she left it to me. Suddenly, I owned 4 properties worth more than $6 million. When the lawyer told me the number, I thought he had made a mistake. I had never held more than a few $1,000s in savings in my life. Wealth felt foreign, heavy, and frightening. I did not know how to manage it. I was afraid of making mistakes. I was afraid of losing it. I was afraid of changing. Around that time, my son Ethan started calling more often. He was 34, lived in Chicago, and worked in online marketing. We had always been distant, especially after he moved out. Our relationship survived on holiday messages and occasional phone calls. Still, I loved him deeply. He was my first child, my first responsibility, my first heartbreak, and my first pride. When he began asking questions about my finances, documents, and ownership papers, I told myself he was just being responsible. When he asked about power of attorney and management rights, I assumed he was worried about me. I ignored the small voice inside me that whispered something was wrong. At that time, I still believed that family meant protection. I still believed that love could not be twisted. I still believed that nothing truly terrible could happen to us. I had no idea how wrong I was. If you're still watching and starting to feel the tension building, please comment number 1 below to let me know you're with me. What I discovered next changed everything, and you won't believe how quickly trust began to fall apart. Now, let's move on to chapter 2. After I inherited my aunt's resorts, something in my relationship with Ethan began to shift, slowly at first, almost too quietly to notice. At the beginning, I told myself it was normal. A son showing interest in his mother's life, her future, her security. That was what good children did, I thought. They worried. They asked questions. They tried to help. I wanted to believe that was all it was. Ethan started calling me every few days. Sometimes it was early in the morning, sometimes late at night. His voice was always polite, but there was a tightness beneath it, a sense of urgency that made me uneasy. He asked about legal documents, about property deeds, about whether I had updated my will. He suggested that I sign management papers so he could handle things for me. Each time I laughed it off and told him I would think about it later. Vanessa soon became part of those conversations. She would join the calls with her calm, professional tone, explaining things about taxes, investments, and market trends. She spoke like someone who had rehearsed every sentence. She never raised her voice. She never sounded emotional. But her words always pushed in the same direction. Transfer authority, centralize control, simplify ownership. I nodded politely, even when I barely understood what she was saying. Inside, I felt conflicted. I had raised Ethan to be independent, confident, and ambitious. Maybe this was just him trying to take responsibility. Maybe I should be proud. At the same time, something felt off. He no longer asked about Lily's school. He no longer asked how I was feeling. Every conversation circled back to money. One afternoon, while helping Lily with her homework on my tablet, I accidentally opened Ethan's email account. He had logged in during his last visit and forgotten to sign out. I was about to close it when one subject line caught my eye. It mentioned a mental capacity evaluation and guardianship options. My hands froze. I should have stopped there. I should have respected his privacy. But fear is stronger than manners. I opened the message. It was written in careful, formal language. Ethan was asking a lawyer about assessing my emotional stability after my husband's death. He wanted to know under what circumstances a court might consider transferring guardianship of Lily. He framed it as concern. He framed it as protection. But every word felt like a knife. My chest tightened. My vision blurred. For several minutes, I could not breathe properly. My own son was preparing for the possibility of taking my child away from me. He was building a legal case behind my back. I closed the email and sat in silence. I did not confront him. I did not tell anyone. I convinced myself I had misunderstood. Maybe he was just being cautious. Maybe Vanessa had pushed him. Maybe it meant nothing. A few days later, Vanessa called me. She spoke cheerfully about a family getaway at Lake Charlevoix. A quiet cabin, fresh air, no phones, time to reconnect. She said Lily would love it. When Lily heard about it, her face lit up. She said she missed her brother. She said she wanted us all together again. I looked at my daughter and felt my resolve weaken. Part of me wanted to say no. Part of me wanted to protect us by staying home. But another part of me needed answers. I needed to see Ethan in person. I needed to understand what he was planning. So I agreed. That night, as I packed our bags, I barely slept. I kept replaying the email in my mind. I kept hearing Vanessa's smooth voice. I kept seeing Ethan's serious expression on video calls. Somewhere deep inside, I knew I was walking towards something dangerous. I just did not know how close it already was. If you're still watching and feeling that something is clearly not right, please comment number 2 below to show your support. What happened next turned quiet suspicion into real danger. Now, let's move on to Chapter 3. The drive to Lake Charlevoix took a little over 3 hours, winding through quiet highways and stretches of pine forest that seemed endless. Lily sat in the back seat with her headphones on, humming softly to herself, her excitement impossible to hide. I watched her through the rearview mirror and tried to match her optimism, even though my stomach felt tight the entire way. The lake appeared suddenly, a wide sheet of silver blue water reflecting the afternoon sky. It was beautiful, too beautiful, the kind of place people went to forget their worries. I wondered why I could not. The cabin stood on a small rise overlooking the water, painted white with dark wooden trim. Every window shone. Every step looked freshly cleaned. Inside, the air smelled faintly of pine cleaner and artificial lemon. Vanessa greeted us with a bright smile and took our bags as if she were hosting a luxury retreat instead of a family visit. Everything felt arranged, measured, and slightly unreal. She led me down a narrow hallway toward a small bedroom near the back of the cabin. It faced the woods, not the lake. The room was tidy, with perfectly folded blankets and unopened toiletries lined up on the bathroom counter. Lily's room, I noticed, was upstairs, closer to Ethan and Vanessa's bedroom. When I asked casually if we could switch, Vanessa laughed lightly and said the upstairs rooms were already settled. I did not press the issue, but the distance settled heavily in my chest. During dinner that evening, we sat around a polished wooden table overlooking the water. The view should have relaxed me. Instead, I felt like I was sitting in front of a stage backdrop. Ethan barely looked at me. He answered questions with short sentences and kept checking his phone. Vanessa carried most of the conversation, steering it toward investments, maintenance costs, and long-term planning. I smiled politely and avoided giving clear answers. Lily talked excitedly about school, unaware of the tension wrapping itself around the table. That night, sleep refused to come. The bed felt unfamiliar. The walls felt too thin. Sometime after midnight, I heard voices drifting from the living room. I held my breath and listened. Ethan sounded frustrated. Vanessa sounded sharp and controlled. I could not hear every word, but one sentence cut through clearly. If she changes her mind, everything falls apart. My heart began to race. I lay still, pretending to be asleep, when their footsteps passed my door. The next morning, the cabin was filled with artificial cheerfulness. Vanessa prepared breakfast while humming softly. Ethan joked with Lily about steering the boat later. No one mentioned the night before. Vanessa poured a pale green drink into insulated bottles and explained it was a detox blend for hydration. She handed one to me with a reassuring smile. I thanked her, though unease crept up my spine. At the marina, Ethan spent a long time checking the equipment. He tested the controls, adjusted cables, and inspected compartments more carefully than seemed necessary. I watched quietly, pretending to admire the water. Lily bounced beside me, eager to start. We finally set out, our small boat cutting through the calm surface. The lake stretched endlessly in every direction. Lily laughed when spray touched her face. I forced myself to relax. Vanessa passed me the bottle again, encouraging me to drink. The liquid tasted faintly bitter beneath the fruit flavor, but I swallowed it anyway. A few minutes later, as I adjusted my seat, something caught my eye. A tiny black lens, no bigger than a fingernail, was hidden near the dashboard. A camera, my breath caught. I leaned closer, trying to be sure. My thoughts raced. Why would there be a camera on our boat? I turned toward Lily to say something, but the world tilted. My arms felt heavy. My head began to swim. The lake blurred into streaks of light. By the time I understood what was happening, I could no longer move. If you're still watching and sensing that a terrible turning point is coming, please comment number 3 to let me know you're still here. The next chapter reveals the moment everything collapsed. Now, let's move on to chapter 4. I woke to the sound of wind scraping across water and the sharp sting of cold air against my face. For several seconds, I did not know where I was. My head felt like it had been split open and stitched back together badly. Every thought moved slowly, as if trapped in thick mud. When I tried to sit up, dizziness rushed over me, forcing me to grip the edge of the seat. The lake stretched endlessly around us. Gray clouds drifted low in the distance, and the sunlight reflected off the surface in blinding flashes. There was no sign of the other boat, no engine noise, no distant movement, just water and silence. Panic rose in my throat, but I pushed it down. I turned toward Lily. She was slumped against the side of the boat, her head tilted at an unnatural angle, her skin pale beneath the freckles scattered across her nose. Her lips were dry and slightly blue. I placed my hand on her chest and felt a faint but steady rise and fall. Relief washed through me so powerfully that my eyes filled with tears. She was alive, for now. I forced myself to focus. Fear would not save us. Action might. I checked the control panel first. The screen was dark. The GPS unit was missing entirely, leaving behind a jagged outline where it had been ripped out. The radio produced nothing but static when I pressed the button. I opened the battery compartment and stared at the empty space inside. The power source was gone. My hands began to shake. This was not an accident. I searched the storage compartments, hoping for flares, a spare battery, anything. There was nothing except a folded life jacket and an empty cooler. At the bottom of one compartment, I found a small piece of paper weighed down by a coin. "Sorry, Mom." That was all it said. I stared at the words until they blurred. My own son had written this. My own child had planned this. A sound rose in my chest that was somewhere between a sob and a scream, but I swallowed it. I could not fall apart. Not now. Memories rushed in against my will. Ethan learning to ride a bicycle. Ethan crying after his first heartbreak. Ethan hugging me when his father died. I had protected him his entire life, and now he had left me here to die. The wind grew stronger, pushing cold air through my thin jacket. I realized my fingers were already numb. Hypothermia was a real danger on these lakes, even in mild seasons. We did not have hours. We had minutes. I took inventory. 1 life jacket, half a bottle of water, no food, no signal, no engine, no rescue, only me. I wrapped the life jacket around Lily and tightened the straps carefully. I used a scarf from my bag to secure her to the seat so she would not slide into the water if the boat shifted. I adjusted her jacket collar to block the wind and brushed her hair back from her damp forehead. I leaned close and whispered that I would come back, that I would not leave her, that she had to stay strong. I did not know if she could hear me, but I needed to say it. Then I looked toward the distant shoreline. It was barely visible, a thin, dark line separating water from sky. It looked impossibly far away. I tried to calculate the distance the way my husband once taught me, using landmarks and angles. Maybe 2 miles, maybe more. In calm conditions, it would be dangerous. In cold water, it could be fatal. But staying meant certain death. I took a deep breath, placed one hand on Lily's shoulder, and promised myself I would return. Then I climbed over the edge of the boat and lowered myself into the freezing water. If you're still watching and feeling your heart race at what just happened, please comment number 4 below so I know you're staying with me. What I faced next was the most terrifying battle of my life. Now, let's move on to chapter 5. The moment my body slipped into the lake, the cold cut through me like broken glass. It was not the refreshing chill people imagine when they think of clear water on a summer day. It was violent. It wrapped around my skin and squeezed the air from my lungs. I gasped uncontrollably, swallowing water before I could stop myself. My muscles seized in protest, shocked by the sudden temperature change. For several seconds, I could not move. Instinct took over before fear could finish me. I forced my arms to begin their slow, painful rhythm. Stroke, breathe. Stroke, breathe. Each movement felt heavier than the last. My clothes dragged against me, pulling me backward. My shoes filled with water and felt like weights tied to my feet. I focused on the distant line of land. If I looked anywhere else, I would panic. The lake seemed endless, stretching far beyond what my exhausted mind could process. The boat with Lily grew smaller behind me until it was nothing more than a pale dot on the horizon. With every stroke, memories rose and fell like waves. I saw Lily at 5 years old, standing on a stool in the kitchen, helping me stir pancake batter. I saw her first day of middle school, gripping my hand as if she were still 7. I saw my husband in his work uniform, smiling tiredly as he walked through the front door. Those images became fuel. They were the only reason my arms kept moving. My breathing grew shallow and irregular. Cold crept deeper into my bones. My fingers lost sensation. I could no longer feel where my hands entered the water. My legs began to cramp, sharp pain shooting through my calves and thighs. I tried to slow down, to conserve energy, but fear pushed me faster than wisdom allowed. The shoreline did not seem any closer. Doubt whispered in my mind. Maybe I had misjudged the distance. Maybe I was swimming in the wrong direction. Maybe I would never reach it. For a moment, I imagined myself sinking quietly beneath the surface, becoming another invisible tragedy no one would ever fully understand. My head dipped underwater, and I inhaled sharply by accident. Water burned my throat. Darkness crowded the edges of my vision. My arms weakened, slipping out of rhythm. I began to sink. In that instant, I thought of Lily alone on the boat. The image tore through me. I kicked harder, forcing my body upward. I broke the surface and coughed violently, choking and gasping. Tears mixed with lake water on my face. I whispered a promise into the wind that I would not give up, no matter how much it hurt. Minutes blurred into each other. Time lost meaning. There was only movement and pain and stubborn will. Then, through my fading vision, I saw something solid, a dark shape, a boat. At first, I thought it was a hallucination, but it grew clearer. A small fishing vessel cut across the water, its engine humming softly. A man stood near the edge, staring at me in shock. Strong arms grabbed me under the shoulders and lifted me over the side. I collapsed onto rough wood, coughing uncontrollably as water poured from my mouth and nose. My body shook violently. The man wrapped a blanket around me and pressed a bottle into my trembling hands. He spoke calmly, grounding me in reality. His voice cut through the fog in my head. I managed to force out one word, Lily. He nodded and immediately reached for his phone. The next hours passed in fragments. An ambulance, bright lights, needles, warmth slowly returning to my fingers and toes, doctors speaking in measured tones, IV fluids dripping steadily into my arm. Someone told me they had found sedatives in my blood. Someone else said the police were on their way. My last conscious thought before sleep claimed me was a silent prayer that Lily was still alive. I woke up to the steady rhythm of machines and the faint smell of disinfectant. For a moment, I thought I was still drifting in the lake, caught between water and sky, unable to move. Then pain spread through my shoulders, my back, and my legs, pulling me fully into consciousness. Every muscle felt bruised. My throat burned. My lips were cracked and dry. I turned my head slowly and saw white walls, a narrow hospital bed, and a window covered by pale blue curtains. A thin blanket rested over my body. My arm was connected to an IV line. Reality settled in piece by piece. The first thought that entered my mind was Lily. I tried to sit up, but weakness forced me back down. Panic rushed through me until a nurse noticed my movement and hurried over. She spoke gently and told me my daughter had been found and brought in shortly after me. Lily was suffering from dehydration and mild hypothermia, but she was stable. She was resting in another room. Relief hit me so hard that I began to cry without warning. Tears slid down my temples and soaked into the pillow. For the first time since I had jumped into the lake, I allowed myself to feel safe. Later that afternoon, 2 police officers arrived. They introduced themselves in the pulled chairs close to my bed. I told them everything, starting from the detox drink and the hidden camera to the missing battery and the note. My voice shook at first, but steady as I continued. Speaking the truth felt like releasing poison from my body. A doctor joined us and explained that blood tests had revealed sedatives in both my system and Lily's. The dosage was high enough to cause unconsciousness and confusion. It was not accidental. It had been administered deliberately. Hearing that word deliberately changed something inside me. What had happened was not negligence. It was a plan. 2 days later, while I was still recovering, another blow came. A social worker entered my room carrying documents. She explained carefully that Ethan had contacted authorities, claiming I had suffered a mental breakdown and endangered my daughter. According to his statement, I had gone boating while emotionally unstable and intoxicated. He insisted that he had tried to help but failed. I felt as if I had been punched. Soon after, I learned that he had hired a man to support his story. A supposed witness claimed he had seen me drinking heavily at the marina. The police informed me they were investigating the claim, but the damage was already spreading. Local forums and social media pages repeated the story. Some people believed it. Then the custody papers arrived. Ethan was suing for temporary guardianship of Lily. I sat on my hospital bed, staring at the envelope long after the nurse left. My hands trembled so badly I could barely hold the pages. My own son was trying to take my child, using lies and manipulation, after nearly killing us both. For hours, I questioned myself. Had I missed warning signs? Had I been too trusting? Had my grief made me weak? Doubt crept into every corner of my mind. That evening, I met Michael Ross. He was calm, direct, and thorough. He explained the legal risks and the evidence we had, the camera footage, the toxicology reports, the damaged equipment, the financial records. He told me the case would be ugly. Ethan would attack my character. He would try to destroy my credibility. Then he looked at me and asked if I was ready. I thought of Lily sleeping alone in a hospital bed. I thought of the freezing water closing around me. I thought of the note that said sorry without meaning it. I straightened my back despite the pain. I told him I was ready. If protecting my daughter meant standing against my own son, then that was what I would do. I had already survived once. I would not surrender now. If you're still watching and standing with me in this fight for justice, please comment number 6 below to show your support. What happened in court exposed secrets no one was prepared for. Now, let's move on to Chapter 7. Walking into the courtroom for the first time felt harder than stepping into the freezing lake. My legs trembled as if they no longer trusted solid ground. The hallway smelled of polished wood and old paper, and every sound echoed too loudly. I held Lily's hand tightly, drawing strength from her small, steady grip. Even months later, the memory of drifting on the water still followed me like a shadow. When we entered the room, I saw Ethan and Vanessa sitting at the defense table. Ethan looked thinner than I remembered. Dark circles framed his eyes, and his shoulders slumped forward. He avoided my gaze, staring at the surface of the table as if it might swallow him. Vanessa, on the other hand, sat upright, her expression calm and distant, as though she were attending a business meeting rather than a criminal trial. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. The prosecutor began by outlining the charges: attempted murder, child endangerment, conspiracy. Each word struck like a hammer. Hearing them spoken aloud made everything painfully real. This was no longer a private family tragedy. It was a public record of betrayal. One by one, the evidence was presented. The hidden camera footage showed Vanessa handing me the bottle and watching as I drank. It showed Ethan adjusting equipment while glancing repeatedly in my direction. It showed our boat drifting farther away while theirs disappeared toward the horizon. Photographs documented the missing battery and damaged radio. Technicians explained how the GPS unit had been removed with professional precision. Medical experts described the sedatives found in my blood and Lily's, matching them to residue discovered in the bottle. I listened in silence, my hands folded in my lap, reliving every second. Then came the so-called witness. The man testified that he had seen me drinking alcohol at the marina and behaving erratically. He claimed he had been concerned for Lily's safety. His voice wavered slightly as he spoke. Under cross-examination, his story began to unravel. Financial records revealed recent payments from Ethan to the witness's account. Text messages showed instructions on what to say. Faced with the evidence, the man admitted he had been hired. His confession rippled through the courtroom. Ethan's head dropped. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand with shaking knees. I described waking on the water, finding the equipment destroyed, reading the note, and choosing to swim. My voice broke when I spoke about Lily lying unconscious beside me. I did not look at Ethan. I focused on the jury, on telling the truth as clearly as I could. The defense attempted to portray me as emotionally unstable. They referenced my husband's death and suggested prolonged grief had affected my judgment. Listening to them dissect my pain felt humiliating, but I held my ground. I had survived too much to be erased by lies. Then the prosecutor introduced the final evidence. Emails retrieved from Ethan's encrypted account showed discussions about insurance, inheritance, and long-term solutions. Some messages dated back nearly 2 years. They outlined scenarios in which my death would appear accidental. They mentioned filming, timing, and legal precautions. The courtroom went completely still. Vanessa closed her eyes. Ethan stared forward in disbelief, as if seeing his own words for the first time. By the time closing arguments ended, I felt emptied. Every emotion had been drained from my body. All that remained was exhaustion. We were both waiting for a decision that would define me. Lily and I sat quietly in the waiting room afterward. She leaned against my shoulder, and I rested my cheek on her hair. Neither of us spoke. We were both waiting for a decision that would define our future, and there was nothing left to do but hope. The day the verdict was announced, the courtroom felt smaller than it ever had before. The air was heavy, thick with tension and unspoken prayers. I sat beside Lily, holding her hand so tightly that my fingers went numb. Neither of us spoke. We had said everything we could in silence during the long months leading up to this moment. When the jury returned, My heart began to pound so loudly that I could hear it in my ears. The foreman stood and read the decision slowly, carefully, as if each word carried weight. Guilty, guilty, guilty. The charges stacked one after another, leaving no room for doubt. Ethan did not react at first. He stared straight ahead, his face pale and frozen. Only when the judge announced the sentence did his shoulders sag, as if something inside him finally collapsed. Vanessa clenched her jaw, her expression tight and unreadable. For a brief moment, her eyes flickered toward me, filled not with regret, but with quiet anger. I expected to feel victorious. I expected relief to wash over me like a warm wave. Instead, what I felt was emptiness, a hollow space where trust, love, and certainty had once lived. Justice had been served, but nothing could restore what had been destroyed. After the trial, life became a series of practical decisions. With Michael's help, I established an irrevocable trust for Lily. Every dollar from the resorts was protected until she reached adulthood. No one could touch it without her consent. I sold 2 of the properties and used the funds to secure our future. I closed joint accounts, revoked old authorizations, and removed Ethan's name from every legal document. Each signature felt like cutting another invisible thread. We decided to leave Michigan. Every street reminded me of fear. Every lake reflected memories I could not escape. Vermont offered distance and quiet, a place where no one knew our story, a place where Lily could breathe again. We began therapy shortly after moving. Lily met with a child psychologist once a week. At first, she barely spoke. She drew pictures of water and empty boats. Slowly, she began to open up. The nightmares faded from nightly visits to rare interruptions. I attended my own sessions, learning how to process anger, grief, and guilt without letting them consume me. 3 months after sentencing, a letter arrived. It was from Ethan. He wrote about remorse, desperation, and regret. He asked for forgiveness. He asked to see me. I read the letter 3 times before placing it in a drawer. I did not answer. Forgiveness, I realized, did not require reopening wounds. Some evenings, I sat alone on the porch of our new home and thought about the boy Ethan once was, the child who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during car rides, the teenager who begged me to attend every school event. The man he had become felt like a stranger wearing my son's face. Packing our old house was the final step. As I sealed the last box, I walked to the window overlooking the distant water. The lake shimmered quietly in the afternoon light, indifferent to human suffering. I whispered goodbye to the woman I had been before everything changed. Then, I closed the door behind me. We were moving forward, and this time, nothing would pull us back. If you're still watching and wondering how this painful journey finally ends, please comment number 8 below to let me know you're ready. The final chapter reveals how everything was transformed forever. Now, let's move on to the conclusion. Our new home in Vermont sat at the end of a narrow gravel road, surrounded by maple trees and quiet fields. It was nothing like the lakeside house in Michigan. There was no wide water view, no tourist traffic, no constant reminder of what had almost taken my life. Instead, there were early morning birds, mist rising from the grass, and a kind of silence that felt gentle rather than threatening. For the first time in years, I slept through the night. Lily started at her new school 2 weeks after we arrived. She was nervous at first, clinging to my hand on the first morning as we stood outside the brick building. But children are resilient in ways adults often forget. Within months, she had made friends, joined the music club, and begun taking violin lessons. She practiced every afternoon in her room, filling the house with hesitant notes that slowly grew confident and strong. Each melody felt like proof that she was healing. I found my own purpose again in unexpected ways. A local community center asked if I could help tutor students who were struggling academically. At first, I agreed out of politeness. Then I discovered how much I had missed teaching. Sitting across from teenagers who doubted themselves reminded me of my younger self and of the woman I used to be before grief and betrayal hardened my heart. Helping them succeed helped me remember that I still mattered. Our days settled into simple routines. We walked together every morning before school. We cooked dinner side by side. On weekends, we visited the library or hiked nearby trails. There was comfort in predictability. After years of chaos, stability felt like luxury. Ethan continued to write. His letters arrived every few months, filled with apologies and reflections. Sometimes he spoke about therapy, sometimes about regret, sometimes about loneliness. I read each one carefully and placed it in a wooden box at the back of my closet. I did not throw them away. I did not respond. Silence was the boundary I needed to survive. Emotionally, I began to breathe again. The panic attacks faded. The nightmares became rare. I stopped replaying the lake in my mind every time I closed my eyes. Therapy taught me how to forgive myself for trusting too much and blaming myself too long. I learned that survival was not weakness. It was courage in its rawest form. Financially, we were secure. The trust for Lily was stable and well managed. I invested conservatively and avoided risks. Money no longer felt like a threat or a temptation. It was simply a tool to protect our future. We built a small circle of friends. Neighbors who brought soup when Lily was sick. Parents from school who invited us over for holidays. Women from the community center who shared stories and laughter. Slowly, we became part of something again. One evening, as Lily practiced in the living room and the sun set behind the hills, I sat in my armchair and listened. Her music filled the space with warmth and life. I closed my eyes and felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Contentment. We were not rich in appearances. We were rich in peace, and that was enough. For a long time, I avoided looking back. Remembering felt dangerous, like reopening a wound that had barely healed. But as the years passed, I realized that my story did not own me anymore. I owned it. What once defined me as a victim had slowly transformed into proof that I was stronger than I ever imagined. I used to believe that family was built on blood alone. I thought that sharing a last name meant sharing loyalty, protection, and love. Losing that illusion was one of the most painful parts of my journey. My own son had become my greatest threat. Accepting that truth nearly broke me. But it also taught me something essential. Real family is not defined by genetics. It is defined by safety, respect, and consistency. Anyone who takes those away forfeits the right to stay. Trust, I learned, must be earned continuously. It is not something that should be given blindly, even to the people closest to us. Listening to my instincts could have saved me months of fear and pain. Ignoring them almost cost me my life. Now, I pay attention when something feels wrong. That awareness is not weakness. It is wisdom. Setting boundaries was another lesson I had to learn late in life. For decades, I believed that being a good mother meant endless sacrifice. It meant forgiving everything. It meant accepting whatever my children did. I was wrong. Protecting myself and my daughter was not selfish. It was necessary. Saying no saved us. Walking away saved us. Forgiveness was the hardest step. For a long time, anger lived inside me like a storm. It exhausted me. It poisoned my thoughts. Eventually, I understood that holding on to hatred was giving Ethan power over my future. Letting go was not for him. It was for me. Forgiveness did not mean forgetting. It did not mean reopening doors. It meant releasing myself from the weight of resentment. As a woman in her 50s, I once feared that my best years were behind me. I worried that loss and betrayal had defined the rest of my life. I was wrong again. Strength does not disappear with age. It grows. It deepens. It sharpens. Experience becomes armor. Pain becomes perspective. Survival becomes confidence. I remain grateful every day. Grateful for the man who pulled me from the water. Grateful for doctors who did not give up on us. Grateful for friends who stood beside me. Grateful for Lily's laughter filling our home. Gratitude keeps my heart open in a world that once tried to close it. If you are reading this while facing betrayal, fear, or uncertainty, I want you to know something. You are not weak for feeling overwhelmed. You are human, but you are also capable of more than you think. Ask for help. Trust yourself. Protect your peace without apology. They thought I would not survive. They were wrong. I survived. I healed. I rebuilt. And today, as I watch my daughter grow into a confident, compassionate young woman, I know that every painful step led us here, to safety, to freedom, to hope. Life does not always unfold the way we expect. Sometimes the people we trust the most become the source of our deepest pain. Sometimes the paths we walk are shaped by loss, betrayal, and moments that test every ounce of our strength. But within those moments, something powerful is born. Resilience. Survival is not about being fearless. It is about moving forward even when fear surrounds you. Healing is not about forgetting. It is about choosing peace over bitterness, growth over regret, and hope over despair. Every difficult chapter teaches us that we are stronger than we realize, wiser than we once were, and capable of rebuilding no matter how broken things may seem. Pain does not have to define us. It can refine us. And every ending, no matter how painful, can become the beginning of something new. Thank you for staying until the end of this journey. If this story touched you, inspired you, or made you reflect, please share your thoughts in the comments. Do not forget to like, follow, and subscribe for more meaningful stories. Your support helps this channel continue bringing hope to others.